Memorial Hall, immediately north of Harvard Yard in Cambridge, Massachusetts, is an imposing High Victorian Gothic building honoring the sacrifices made by Harvard men in defense of the Union during the American Civil War, a symbol of Boston's commitment to the Unionist cause in the abolitionist movement in America. Quote, built on a former playing field known as the Delta, it was described by Henry James as consisting of three main divisions, one of them a theatre, 4 academic ceremonies, another a vast refectory, covered with a timbered roof, hung about with portraits and lighted by stained windows, like the halls of the colleges of Oxford, and the third, the most interesting, a chamber high, dim and severe, consecrated to the sons of the university who fell in the long Civil War. James' 3 divisions are known today as, respectively, Sanders Theatre, Annenberg Hall, formerly Alumni Hall or the Great Hall, and Memorial Transept. Beneath Annenberg Hall, Loker Commons offers a number of student facilities, conception and construction. Between 1865 and 1868, an alumni committee of 50 raised $370,000, equal to 1/12 of Harvard's entire endowment at the time, toward a new building in memory of Harvard men who had fought for the Union in the American Civil War, particularly the 136 dead. A hall of alumni in which students and graduates might be inspired by the pictured and sculpted presence of her founders, benefactors, faculty, presidents, and most distinguished sons. Quote, when, about the same time, a $40,000 bequest was received from Charles Sanders, class of 1802, for a hall of theatre to be used on any public occasion connected with the college, whether literary or festive. A vision was formed of a single building containing a large theatre as well as a large open hall, and thus meeting both goals. A site was found on the Delta, the triangle bounded by Cambridge, Kirkland, and Quincy streets. The project was formally named Memorial Hall in September 1870. And on October 6 the cornerstone was laid. Oliver Wendell Holmes, Sr., composing a hymn for the occasion. In May 1878 the Committee of 50 notified the President and Fellows that the project was complete, and the premises ready for formal transfer to the university. On July 8 the President and Fellows unanimously voted to accept with profound gratitude this splendid and precious gift. Quote, architecture and facilities. The building's High Victorian Gothic design, by alumni William Robert Ware and Henry Van Brunt, was selected at a blind competition. A 1907 publication gives dimensions of 305 by 113 feet, with a height of 190 feet at the tower. A 2012 source gave a height of 195 feet, making it the 9th tallest building in Cambridge at that time. Its 1970 National Historic Landmark designation recognized it one of the nation's most dramatic examples of High Victorian Gothic architecture. A general restoration was carried out between 1987 and 1996. Annenberg Hall, what was originally known as Alumni Hall, 9,000 square feet shaped by massive wooden trusses, walnut paneling, and a blue, stenciled ceiling, was dedicated in 1874. Originally intended for formal occasions such as alumni dinners, it was almost immediately converted to a dining commons, and was for 50 years the college's main dining hall, charging, in 1884, $3.97 for a month's meals. In 1893 the Harvard Graduates magazine described the throngs of men who, at 1 o'clock, are to be seen racing across the yard from Harvard, Boylston, and Sever halls, striving to reach Memorial. Hall ahead of slower competitors for vacant seats at the overtaxed tables. But, as the center of university life moved south toward the Charles, the dining commons became less popular and closed in 1925. See Harvard College section house system, after which Alumni Hall saw mostly light use, typically as a venue for dances, banquets, examinations, and the like. In 1934, the New York Times reported that Harvard officials had at last found a use for Memorial Hall, by citing a rifle range in the basement. During World War II, the Crimson reported that the Great Hall was being used in wintertime for the 6 o'clock in the morning calisthenics of the military chaplain's school, though without explaining why Harvard divinity students had been singled out for this treatment, and intimated that Stevens' laboratory in the basement is doing secret work in acoustics. Quote, after extensive renovations, in 1996 the space was renamed Annenberg Hall and supplanted as the freshman dining hall. The Harvard Union, which had performed that function during most of the intervening time. Memorial Transept. The Memorial Transept, 2,600 square feet, 240 square meters, consists of a 60-foot high, 18 meters, Gothic vault above a marble floor, black walnut paneling and stenciled walls, a large stained glass over each of 2 exterior doors, and, commemorating 136 Harvard men who died fighting for the Union, 28 white tablets, tablets to one after another of the many who thus died. A thrilling list. One sees such old New England names as Peabody, Wadsworth, and Bowditch. One sees the name of Fletcher Webster. One sees that an Edward Revere died at Antietam and a Paul Revere at Gettysburg. Confederate deaths are not represented. Memorial Transept acts as a vestibule for Sanders Theatre. Sanders Theatre. Sanders Theatre, substantially completed in 1875, but first used for Harvard's 1876 commencement, was inspired by Christopher Wren's Sheldonian Theatre, renowned for its acoustics, and with 1166 seats Harvard's largest meeting place. Sanders is in great demand for lectures, concerts, ceremonies and conferences. Winston Churchill, Theodore Roosevelt, Martin Luther King, Jr., and Mikhail Gorbachev have spoken there. Sanders features John Lafarge's stained glass window Athena tying a mourning fillet. Statues of James Otis, by Thomas Crawford, and Josiah Quincy III, by William Wetmore Story, flank the stage. The exterior gables display busts of great orators: Demosthenes, Cicero, John Chrysostom, Jacques Benin Bossuet, William Pitt, 1st Earl of Chatham, Edmund Burke, and Daniel Webster. Sanders contributed in an unusual way to the early work of Wallace Sabine, considered the founder of architectural acoustics. In 1895, tasked with improving the dismal acoustical performance of the Fogg Museum's lecture hall, Sabine carried out a series of nocturnal experiments there, using hundreds of seat cushions borrowed from nearby Sanders as sound-absorbent material. Each night's work being limited by the requirement that the cushions be back in Sanders in time for morning lectures there. The scientific unit of sound absorption, the Sabin, is very close to the absorption provided by one Sanders Theatre cushion. Loker Commons, beneath Annenberg Hall. Loker Commons offers a student pub, music practice spaces, and other facilities. Fenestration. 22 stained glass windows, installed between 1879 and 1902, include several by John Lafarge, Louis Comfort, Tiffany Studios, Donald MacDonald, Sarah Wyman Whitman, and Charles Mills. Tower and clock. The central tower was nearly complete by 1876, but criticism convinced Van Brunt and Ware to revise it in 1877. In 1897 was added what a 1905 guidebook described as an enormous four-faced clock which detonates the hours in a manner which is by no means conducive to the sleep of the just and the rest of the weary, and which Kenneth John Conant termed Railroad Gothic. In 1932 the clock's driving works, and the associated 155-pound, 70 kilograms, bell clapper, were somehow lowered 115 feet, 35 meters, to the ground without attracting attention. Visiting Yale students were suspected, but the clapper was never found. 3 years later the disappearance of the replacement clapper, under similar circumstances, was rumored to be Yale's revenge for the theft of its mascot, Handsome Dan. The 1897 tower was destroyed by fire in 1956 and rebuilt to its 1877–1897 appearance. In 1996, original backdrop to John Harvard statue. The John Harvard statue was originally 1884, installed before Memorial Hall's west facade, but in 1924 it was moved to its current location on the west side of University Hall. Memorial Hall being still, at the time, the college dining hall. A Harvard Lampoon cartoon showed John Harvard dismounting his plinth chair in tow, and holding his nose because he couldn't stand the smell of mem any longer. See also, List of National Historic Landmarks in Massachusetts. National Register of Historic Places listings in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Notes. Memorial Hall, Harvard University. High Victorian Gothic photographs. Harvard, America's Great University Now Leads the World. Life. Volume 10. No. 18. May 5, 1941. Cover. pp. 22. 89–99. Photo caption. p. 95. In Memorial Hall, a huge Victorian Gothic barn dedicated to Harvard's Civil War dead. The college's naval R.O.T.C. unit drills. Quote,